What happens when a CEO walks into the very bank they founded, only to be treated like a stranger? What unfolds next? Camilla Hayes was not the kind of person to let suspicion pass in silence. As the founder of Hayes Mutual Bank, built from the ground up, she had once believed that fair policies, proper training, and a solid oversight system were enough to shield customers from any form of discrimination. But over time, stories began to surface from various branches. Whispers from friends, murmurs from partners, anonymous emails. No scandals made the headlines, no uproar on the surface, just a string of small details, minor experiences that felt like £1,000 to those who lived them. Camilla knew that sometimes the greatest problem lies within the place you trust the most. And to uncover the truth, she needed to become an outsider. That morning in Atlanta, she arrived at Branch 14, the same location where 3 years earlier she had cut the ribbon and delivered an impassioned speech on trust and community service. But today, there was no cream blazer, no Louboutins. Instead, Camilla wore an old cardigan, jeans, and worn sneakers. Her hair was neatly tied back, her face lightly made up, and no one in the lobby would have guessed that this ordinary woman had once been dubbed the new Queen of Finance by Forbes. She stepped through the glass doors, cool air brushing her face, the familiar scent of paper, polished wood, and office air freshener settling around her. She paused for a moment to observe. To the left, a couple flipped through loan documents in the waiting area. Ahead, 3 tellers were assisting other customers. But what made her pause was the sight to her right. A middle-aged white man had just entered and was immediately greeted with a warm handshake by a young male employee who led him straight to the VIP consultation area. Meanwhile, Camilla had stood there for 10 seconds, and no one had acknowledged her. A vague but piercing sense crept into her mind. It mirrored the accounts she had heard. Discrimination doesn't always speak out loud. It often whispers through silence, through whom we choose to smile at and whom we choose to ignore. When she approached the teller desk, the first glance from a young female employee skimmed over her quickly, then snapped back to the computer screen. No greeting, no question. Camilla gave a slight smile, took a step forward, and spoke calmly. "Hello. I'd like to withdraw some money from my personal account." The employee didn't look up, simply pushed a clipboard forward and muttered flatly, "Fill this out." No eye contact, no confirmation of the request, just a mechanical gesture. Camilla took the pen and slowly filled in the form. Name, account number, withdrawal amount, $5,000. Not a large amount for a CEO, but enough to test what would happen next. She pushed the clipboard back and gently handed over her ID. At that moment, the teller's expression shifted. Her eyes scanned the name, and tension crept into her face. Her lips pressed together. Her hand froze mid-air, as if weighing a decision. Camilla felt the air change, like a static charge grazing her skin. She said nothing, only observed. Then, without a word, the teller took the ID and quickly disappeared into the back room, without explanation, without saying when she would return. Camilla stood still, both hands resting lightly on the counter, exhaling slowly. Deep down, she knew this would not end here. But what she didn't yet realize was that what would follow wouldn't just test this branch. It would become the catalyst for a reckoning that would transform the entire banking system forever. Camilla waited at the counter for a few more minutes, long enough to realize that not only was time being dragged out, but the silence was beginning to feel unsettling. The other tellers continued working, printers humming, keyboards tapping. murmurs drifting from the waiting area behind her. But in front of her, where a simple transaction should have taken place, everything seemed to be held back, as if a scene was being staged behind the curtain. She quietly glanced to her left, where a man in a grey suit was being cheerfully assisted by a young male employee with no repeated questions and no extra paperwork. Meanwhile, she, the person who had once signed off on the authorization for this very branch, was left standing there without a single word of explanation. A frosted glass door behind the counter opened, and the young teller from earlier returned, followed by a man in his early 40s, solidly built, with a shaved head and rimless glasses. The name tag on his chest read clearly, Aaron Schultz, branch manager. His expression was polite enough, but lacked the natural warmth of someone genuinely looking to help. He approached, stopping across from Camilla at the marble counter, offering a perfunctory smile before speaking. "Hello, I'm Aaron. I understand you're here to make a cash transaction." Camilla nodded slightly. "That's correct. I already filled out the form and gave my ID to your employee." Aaron shot a quick glance at the teller before picking up the ID and holding it under the light, as if inspecting for forgery. A gesture that might have seemed procedural in any other context, but here it carried a quiet undertone of suspicion. After a few seconds, he looked up and asked in an oddly neutral tone, "Ms. Hayes, is this your first time visiting our branch?" Camilla let out a faint smile. "I opened my account before this branch even had its sign hung up." Aaron nodded slowly, pretending to process the information. "And the amount you'd like to withdraw is $5,000, correct?" Her voice remained steady. "It's written clearly on the form." Amid what appeared to be harmless questions, Camilla began to sense something far more troubling than a direct refusal. The deliberate delay, the disguised tests hidden beneath the label of verification protocol. Aaron looked back down at the ID in his hand, then without looking up, asked, "Ms. Hayes, what do you currently do for a living?" The question came out casually, but it cut like a blade. Camilla tilted her head slightly, her gaze sharpening. "I work in finance." Aaron nodded. "What kind of finance, if you don't mind sharing?" Camilla paused for a beat, then answered, "Banking." A quiet pause. Aaron's eyes narrowed slightly, but he continued. "So this is a personal account, correct? Not a business account?" Camilla nodded again, her patience now being tested in the most unsubtle way. After another pause, Aaron looked toward the employee beside him, as if waiting for an invisible signal. At last, he set the ID back down on the counter and folded his hands together, as though it was time to deliver a verdict. "I'm sorry, but at this time, we're unable to process your transaction." Camilla leaned in slightly. "Excuse me, what do you mean?" Aaron kept his tone even. "We're unable to verify the transaction." A vague statement, without a clear reason, no specific grounds, and definitely no goodwill. Camilla felt a surge of heat rise from her chest. All documents had been provided, every step followed by the book. So what exactly was this unverified status referring to? Still composed, she asked, "What exactly do you need to verify, Mr. Schultz?" Aaron tilted his head, reciting in a rehearsed tone, "Just a few additional procedures to ensure the safety of large cash transactions." Camilla raised an eyebrow. "You consider $5,000 large?" He nodded without blinking. "Depends on the customer's profile." And in that moment, Camilla understood fully. To them, the issue wasn't the amount. It was her, or more precisely, the image of her that they had already decided upon. Behind the counter, other customers continued being served, with no delays, no questions. Camilla took a deep breath, her fingers lightly tapping the marble surface, as though winding up for something larger. Because she knew with clarity, this was only the beginning. The air inside the bank seemed to thicken as Aaron Schultz continued to cite security protocol like a curtain shielding prejudice. Camilla remained in place, but something in her gaze had shifted. She no longer tried to be agreeable, and no longer felt the need to persuade anyone. She knew full well she was being tested not over a transaction, but over the invisible assumptions pinned to her the moment she walked through the door. "I've provided my ID, filled out the form, and I'm not a new customer. What more do you need to process a legal withdrawal from an account in my name?" Her voice was not loud, but it sliced through the artificial air of the lobby like a blade. Aaron, unfazed, responded with the kind of expression honed over years of handling difficult customers, calm, polite, and empty. "For safety reasons, we may require further verification. For example, could you provide the amount of your most recent deposit to this account?" Camilla frowned. That question did not fall under any standard verification protocol, especially not when she had already submitted valid identification. This was clearly a test, crafted to make her feel small, scrutinized, a form of discrimination cleverly disguised as internal policy. "You're asking me to recall the exact amount of my last deposit?" Camilla repeated, her voice steady, almost cold. Aaron neither confirmed nor denied, simply shrugged. "We believe legitimate customers should be well aware of their transactions." That sentence hit the final edge of her patience. Camilla didn't respond. Instead, she reached into her bag, pulled out her phone, and in full view of the lobby, activated the camera and held it up. "I want to record this entire interaction. Just a short clip showing how a customer is denied a withdrawal despite presenting valid ID and documentation." Aaron flinched for a second, his eyes flickering, but his response was smooth, like it had been rehearsed. "Ms. Hayes, we are following proper security procedures. Filming inside the bank is not appropriate." "What's not appropriate is how you're handling this transaction," Camilla cut in. Her voice remained even, but the sharpness of it caused a nearby employee to glance over instinctively. A beat later, Aaron, expression unchanged, quietly reached under the counter and pressed a silent alarm. There was no sound, but Camilla knew exactly what had just happened, and that moment marked the shift in the direction of the entire encounter. Less than a minute later, a door down the hall opened. A man in a security uniform stepped in, tall, fair-skinned, eyes alert. His hand hovered near his waist, where a radio and utility pouch rested. "Is there a problem here?" His voice was deep and seemingly neutral, but Camilla heard the tension behind every word. Aaron leaned toward him, speaking in a hushed tone Camilla couldn't catch, then turned back to her. "We simply want to ensure a safe and fair experience for all our customers." Camilla let out a soft laugh, a smile sharp as a paring knife. "You called security on a woman trying to withdraw money from her own account?" She turned to the guard. "Were you called to assist a customer or to escort her out?" The guard looked slightly taken aback, his gaze shifting rapidly between the two, clearly unsure who held the real authority in this situation. Aaron, maintaining his icy, polite smile, said softly, "If Ms. Hayes would like to continue the transaction, she may return later with additional verification." Camilla slowly shook her head, raised her phone to chest level, and let the camera face Aaron and the guard behind him. "Then perhaps it's time I clarify exactly who I am. The tension was no longer about a denied transaction. It was now perched at the edge of revelation, where the role of the anonymous customer was about to be dropped, and the truth would force this entire branch to confront what it had never been prepared for. Camilla stood still for a beat in front of the phone camera, her hand steady as if she had long prepared for this very moment. She didn't need to raise her voice or manufacture cheap theatrics, because the taut silence in the bank lobby was enough to draw every eye toward her. "I just want to make sure everything is documented," she said clearly, her gaze fixed on the screen. "I've presented legal identification, provided all required information, yet I'm being denied a transaction, while other customers experience no obstruction." Aaron furrowed his brow, about to speak, but she turned the camera toward the security guard instead. "Why were you called here? Was there any disruptive behavior taking place?" The guard hesitated, not wanting to be the focus of attention, even less so on social media in the wrong context. "I just received a request for support," he replied quietly, stepping half a pace back, as if trying to move out of frame. Camilla didn't miss a beat. She turned the camera back toward Aaron, who was still clinging to a veneer of composure. "Let me help you understand what's actually happening here," she said, placing her phone down, still recording. She reached out across the counter slowly and confidently, picked up her ID, flipped it over, and tapped firmly on the bolded name. "Camilla Hayes," she enunciated each syllable. "Chief Executive Officer and founder of Hayes Mutual. I'm not just a customer. I am the one who approved the funding that keeps this branch open, the one who signed the contract that allows you to walk into this building every morning." A stunned silence rippled through the space. Aaron's eyes widened, then twitched involuntarily. His hand gripped the edge of the counter, as if seeking balance. The guard retreated fully into the hallway. Other employees began glancing at one another, their faces attempting to remain neutral, yet none of them brave enough to continue working. A customer in the waiting area dropped their phone to the floor without even noticing. Everyone seemed caught in the pull of a silent gravity, the weight of truth. Camilla tilted her head slightly, her eyes still locked onto Aaron's. "I didn't come here today to inspect the computer system or the security protocols," she said, her voice lower now but sharp as a razor's edge. "I came to examine the human system, the people expected to embody the values of a bank I've spent my life building." Aaron opened his mouth, perhaps to apologize or to offer an explanation, but Camilla raised her hand to stop him. "No need. I've heard and seen enough. Now it's time for you to listen to me." She glanced at the recording phone, then brought her eyes back to his, now lit with unmistakable resolve. "You don't need to verify the most recent deposit on my account. What you need to verify is yourself. How you treat someone you assumed didn't matter, didn't deserve respect." She paused, then spoke even more softly, loud enough only for those nearby to hear. "The only difference between me and the man you eagerly welcomed 15 minutes ago is how we look, and you can't deny that." Aaron looked around, his eyes scanning for a lifeline in a sea of silence. But no one stood with him. The entire bank lobby had become an invisible courtroom, where every glance was an indictment, and the quiet itself was a verdict. Camilla took a step back, her expression unwavering. "Now I'll ask again. Do you want to complete this transaction, or shall I forward this recording to our internal systems and the media?" At that moment, Aaron knew. There was no way to walk this back, and he, more than anyone, had set the stage for a performance he would never have the strength to finish. Aaron stood frozen like a statue, the usual color of confidence drained from his face. His fingers trembled slightly, gripping the edge of the counter as if trying to hold on to some semblance of composure that could mask the mistake he had just made. Gone was the image of a poised branch manager with rehearsed protocol and polished posture. Standing before Camilla now was simply a man caught in quiet panic, stripped of the mask he never realized he was wearing. Camilla did not emphasize her victory. She didn't clap back, didn't need to deliver any triumphant lines, because the truth had already revealed itself. Instead, she calmly reached into her pocket, pulled out a white business card trimmed with silver, and slid it across the counter like a blade that cut clean without drawing blood. "This is my direct contact to the executive office," she said, her tone as calm as if she were commenting on the weather. "Tomorrow morning, you'll have a meeting with the senior leadership board. And in that meeting, I want you to explain, in detail, why a branch manager called security on a customer who had proper identification, simply because that customer didn't look the way you expected." Aaron took the card with both hands but said nothing. His eyes fixated on the embossed words, "Camilla Hayes, CEO, Hayes Mutual," as if staring into a sentence that had just been passed. Nearby, the security guard had removed his glasses, now standing back against the wall with his arms limp at his sides. And the young teller, the one who first averted her eyes and overlooked the name on the ID, was now doing her best to avoid any contact, her shoulders shrinking beneath the weight of the silence she had upheld. Camilla turned to the young woman, her expression no longer angry, but unmistakably firm. "You saw my name on the ID. You saw the account verified instantly in the system. You saw me present every required document. But you didn't look at me like a customer. You looked at me like a problem. And your silence gave to someone like Mr. Schultz the green light to believe that behavior was acceptable." The woman opened her mouth, perhaps to offer an apology, maybe to justify herself, but Camilla gently shook her head. "Not yet. I only have one question for you. Why does the process only become strict when the customer looks like me?" No one answered. No excuses. No apologies. Everything fell quiet, as if the room had just weathered a storm no one dared to name. Camilla bent down to pick up her phone, ended the recording, and swept a final look across the lobby. The customers, those who initially looked away and pretended not to notice, were now watching her every step. But it was not curiosity in their eyes anymore. It was reflection. They had just witnessed an unmasking not only of a person, but of a system. A lesson not found in any training manual, but one they would never forget. Camilla turned to leave, not sparing Aaron a second glance. But as her hand touched the glass door, she paused, not to threaten, not to scold, but to leave behind a declaration, a warning, and a promise. If even I, the person who built this bank, can be doubted, can be treated like a stranger, then I can't imagine how badly others must be treated. She raised her head, her gaze sharp like forged steel. "And starting tomorrow, everything changes, beginning with you, Mr. Schultz." The door closed behind her, leaving not the usual hush of a quiet lobby, but the hollow space of a truth that had just detonated. A corporate empire had just cracked, not from financial failure, but because the people inside had let prejudice corrode the culture they once took pride in. And for Camilla, the storm had only just begun. Early the next morning, before the sun had a chance to dry the thin veil of dew clinging to the glass windows of Hayes Mutual's headquarters, an emergency meeting was convened. The executive room on the 38th floor, usually filled with the sound of quarterly earnings reports and expansion strategies, was now completely silent. except for the rhythmic tapping of a pen in Camilla's hand. On the large screen at the head of the table, surveillance footage from the Atlanta branch played back in full. One by one, the board members watched the entire sequence. Camilla being ignored at the counter, Aaron Schultz summoning security as though dealing with a threat. No one spoke. They didn't need to. What they saw said more than enough. When the video ended, Camilla stood, her eyes sweeping across each person like the slow movement of a second hand on a clock face. "This is not an incident," she began, her voice steady but resolute. "This is a symptom, and if we don't treat it as a systemic illness, then let's stop calling this a trust-based institution." No one argued. No one dawdled. Instead, a flurry of immediate actions was approved that same morning. Aaron Schultz was suspended without delay. A directive was issued to audit customer service protocols at all branches. And Camilla, as if that weren't enough, went even further. She ordered the creation of a new department, the Anonymous Experience Review Unit. This team would send undercover customers from every race, class, and gender to conduct routine transactions at random branches, documenting everything from the first glance to the final farewell. But that wasn't the heart of her plan. "I don't just want the system to fear exposure," Camilla said before the entire executive board. "I want every employee to understand that kindness doesn't come from fear of losing a job. It comes from a conscience rooted in fairness." Later that day, an internal video was distributed across all branches. In it, Camilla, still dressed in the same modest clothes she had worn to the Atlanta branch, stood in front of the camera with a direct gaze. No marketing fluff, no slogans. Just a simple recounting of the experience she had endured within the very system she built. At the end of the video, she said, "If that could happen to me, then it has surely happened, and is still happening, to those without a voice. And that's something I will never allow to happen again." The impact was almost immediate. Employees who had previously read procedures like textbooks now began to understand the intent behind every policy. They no longer just asked, "Do you have your documents?" They started asking themselves, "Have I greeted this person as a human being?" And something remarkable happened. Customers began to feel the shift. Those who once avoided the nearest branch because of cold treatment returned. Words of appreciation were spoken more often. The guarded stares began to fade. Not because of fear, but because trust was being restored. As for Aaron, he was never seen again. In an email sent to the executive office, he wrote a lengthy apology, trying to explain that it had all been a misunderstanding, a misapplied procedure. Camilla replied with a single sentence. No one misunderstood the procedure. Someone simply misused it on the wrong person. And with that, the door to his banking career closed permanently. Camilla said nothing more, but everyone who had witnessed that morning understood. She was not just running a business. She was reminding the entire system that if a place is built on trust, then it is the people who enact that trust who hold it together. And on that day, Hayes Mutual did more than avert a crisis. It was reborn through the courage of a leader who dared to step into the blind spot and forced the whole institution to look inward. In the world of business, it is not the procedures or slogans that define a company's culture, but how people behave when no one is watching. The story of Camilla Hayes is a clear reminder that real power does not come from a title, but from the choice to rise when justice is dismissed. If you believe that respect should never be determined by appearance, like this video, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this, and leave a comment with the phrase, "Deserve better," to help spread these meaningful values.